You know it's this. Take a perk and a talk of that shit. Money swallowed like sis. Did it perfect in the kid. Got a billion who sang on my head. Look at better put on the road I just spent. I know we got $1 million. The devil that shit ain't not cheap again.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to MangaMuse. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the third part of What If Deku Meets Bofuri. Special note, this fanfic is written and a masterpiece of Kuji17 on FANFICTIONnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. Non-school associated. Hero exam. Section 3. With the twins. Mai and Yui used smaller shockwaves with aftershock to push the villain minions back while the others made sure they got the victims out of the way of the fight. It was tough, but once they confirmed that the victims were out of the way, the twins finally got serious. Mai by using double stamp to kick up dust, while Yui used aftershock to blow the bus to the villains created cover for them to split up to the two sides of their current position. Once recovered and seeing they little girls disappeared as more of the hero applicants show up to take their place stood ready. Deciding to grab the brats to torture later for making fools of them, they charged, right into a strike of aftershock from either side. Unfortunately for them, the sudden spike in pressure on their bodies by the two shockwaves clashing amplifying each other had rather unpleasant effects. Their muscles tensed up causing them to double over, their ears temporarily deafened, and their heads feeling like they were about to explode from intense headaches. Sadly for them, the other hero candidates after waiting a moment moved in to capture them, tying them up. Now they were indefinitely disarmed for the next few days at minimum. Non-school associated. Hero exam. Section 3. With Chrome and the One Piece boys. Going after Doru as he appeared to be the physically weakest link, the villain moved in to strike him down, only for Chrome to block it. The shield as a result drained a small amount of their energy, healing some of the damage Chrome took. Then taking a swipe at the villain with his cleaver, Chrome got a shallow hit in the underarm, once again draining energy, finishing the healing of the minor damage they managed to deal. This naturally shocked the villain as he did not think the creepy armor was meant to match a powerful energy-draining quirk like this. Keep your guards up, those flames give a good boost of speed and power to his kicks on top of the burn damage. Chrome told them as he was the first one to test the opponent's physical strength so far. Supa nodding to him moved in next, attacking from the right after circling around. Naturally the villian moved back to their left to get distance. To his surprise, the freak in the swan ballet-like outfit instantly jumped to him, delivering their own roundhouse kick. Then they transitioned to an axe kick from above, jumping over and dodging him punch. Back flipping, he unleashed his quirk, causing Supa to stop in his tracks to avoid the fire. The villian clashed with Main in a momentary deadlock. Chrome then smashed into him with his shield, tossing him a few meters back as a result, right into quickly cooling wax. This is the same stuff the Bastard used to patch up the wall. They thought before blasting himself free with his quirk. Looks like I have to use it. He shouted in anger as it was clear his heat-proof armor and quirk were not enough. And after he went through the stomach-churning annoyance of buying this armor, it made him look like a rip-off Ingenium. This made them back off, and it was smart of them to do so, as first the villian blasted off the wax covering the holes on the back of his armor's leg. The Inferno towering behind them for a moment before they ripped off their helmet and unleashed his recently acquired quirk, Fire Breath. Creating a wall of fire with it, he took a moment to catch his breath, before unleashing another stream of fire from his mouth at them. Chrome running up to kneel down right before the wall of fire confused them just moments before Supa and Main jumped over his shoulders. Rushing forward in an attempt to use his fire legs to intercept them, Main struck with right leg, revealing it to be covered in wax. With this as a shield of sorts against the fire, preventing him from getting burned like he did before. This allowed him to handle the brunt of the attack for a few more seconds this time, giving Supa the opportunity to getting good 2 slashes in. As a result, the villain got kicked strong in the face by Main, who laughed in joy at getting a strike back on them after getting his leg minority burned. The spot that was slashed by Supa was the legs, destroying the armor there, preventing him from easily concentrating his fire like before. Sadly, it was too thick to get any real damage in, but essentially disabling his flame boost to his kicks was enough to make the effort worth it. Rushing back in, Chrome blocked the next fire breath attack only for Doru to cover the villian mouth with his wax, preventing more fire breath. Chrome and Supa held them down while Doru covered the villain legs with wax to prevent a widespread flame burst. Non-school associated. Hero exam. Observation room. I told you all that those four could handle this opponent. The president said, relaxing as their own heroes took the villain to a holding cell, saying they were taking the fake villian to the infirmary. Everyone relaxed and began arranging for the wall to be fixed and the cameras to be replaced immediately. Though they had to put off the investigation into this villian and his crew as they still had final grades to hand out. Fortunately for them, no one failed the exam thanks to the Help Me company being quite impressed by the turned out to be real trouble. Needless to say, they were upset to find out the villains were real, but after being given the in-depth explaining of how it occurred, they calmed down. Improper communication plus the coincidence of the two little girls causing an earthquake damaging their security made it unavoidable. Some of the employees who knew about the earthquake damaging the cameras suggested they upgrade their stuff. But showing them the reach of the twins' earthquake outside of the dome made them go silent at the utter outliers of this year's exam. Lucky for the president, this was something she could share with them, as she only shared the results of their earlier quirk attack outside of the dome. So that meant they did not see the footage of the actual combat portion of the exam. This means that her secret of the twins' quirks and how they worked was still hers for the time being. But not for long, as she knew Nizu and other people with certain levels of government clearance could see the exam. UA exam day in Izu office. Today the school was flooded with hopeful future students wishing to enter UA Academy, with Nizu watching them all trickle in non-stop for the past 30 minutes. Among them were some recognizable faces, the sons and daughters of pro heroes, though he was doubting many would pass. If they took the regular exam they would have a great chance of passing, however due to foolish pride nearly all of them took the recommended exam thanks to their parents. Fortunately, Tensei Ida, younger brother, is not foolish enough to put his family pride before his own future. He said with a sigh of relief before seeing him scold another applicant. When he said his little brother was a little too straight-laced, he really meant it. Nizu thought this before releasing another sigh, this time not of relief but of a headache, already seeing him getting into a conflict with someone today. Then he spotted the incognito Maple walking through the front gate with Himiko. Since no one knew of her partial transformation, everyone assumed she was a mutant quirk user with a similar-looking face to the images of Mirko normal-looking daughter. Though the mouse principal could not help but question why she was carrying 2 buckets with her. Soon Present Mike came in to let him know it was time to get to the exam room for the recommended student-written exam. Also, he said that his student assistant at the support gear registration desk told him 2 girls had some odd support gear registration. One had themselves a mutant quirk, put down some light armor and 2 buckets of chipotle sauce. The other had a pair of shorts filled with over 100 throwing knives. Though Present Mike kept the fact that they were behaving like a silly couple to himself. As despite appearances, Nizu loves to stick his nose into other people's romance and cause drama. Nizu, however, knew who he was talking about and now knew what Maple planned on doing. Looks like Maple might have had a light breakfast today. Nizu said aloud, confusing Present Mike. After he let out a chuckle, he told the voice hero not to worry about it and he would find out later. UA exam day. Mirko and Midnight dropped off Himiko and Maple near the school away from foot traffic so people would not notice them. After she stepped out of the car, Maple transformed and as a result went from being slightly shorter than Himiko to being considerably taller than her. After her armor took a few seconds to snap into place, Himiko very giddily jumped into her arms, well, her lower arms anyway, while Maple used one of her top 2 arms to pet her head. Since getting the first version of the armor, she discovered she could grow a second set arms while training. This meant Izuku had to get power loader's assistance to redesign it a little for the secondary arms to be covered as well. Their answer to this new situation, they made another separate forearm piece and had it hung on a small heater to absorb that heat. At first the others asked why they simply did not make a heating rack for the full armor. The answer was rather unfortunate. The heating rack would damage this piece of the armor unlike Maple's own body, so this meant they would need to replace this piece more regularly. Naturally she was wearing a black body suit custom made out of a strong stretchable material to wear under her armor. For footwear Maple was wearing black thigh-high socks under her metal boots that Izuku made to go with the rest of her armor. Naturally these absorbed her body heat and expanded with her transformed state like the rest of her armor she was wearing. As the two girls walked to UA, Izuku went with his two mothers to watch the test from the observation room as they wanted his opinion on the students' quirks. When the two girls made it through the front gate they got plenty an odd look, mostly due to Maple though. Granted the smaller girl being carried by her and nuzzling her was strong not to notice as well, causing more than a few to blush. Maple Tail was naturally SWNGNG side to side as she always enjoys cuddling with Himiko. That and today she brought 2 buckets of chipotle sauce with her for the robots, making sure to eat a light breakfast of only 20 or so eggs, a single pack of bacon, and half a jug of milk. Himiko was dressed in a white body suit that Izuku made her, with black walking shorts over it and white thigh-high socks. Both the body suit and the knee socks were made to help her hold on to her heat, though only slightly higher than an average sports gear from stores. This was due to the fact that Himiko did not need to preserve her body heat like Maple did in her transformed form. The reason she wears shorts is to hold all her throwing knives for the exam along with a few hunting knives for close combat. She decided to go with light brown boots going up to just below her knees instead of running shoes. The guy at the desk was giving them a strong time with too many questions before the few people behind them were getting upset with him. So after finally agreeing to let them register the 2 buckets of chipotle sauce as support gear, they went to the introduction hall. People made some space for the 2 girls as they walked the halls. When they got to the info hall they took their seats. Unfortunately for the 2 girls, they noticed on their cards that they were sent to different test sites. So Himiko, being childish as she was, insisted that Maple hold her till the written exams occurred. Many of the people around them were blushing as they were not used to this sort of thing happening in front of them. As President Mike started talking about the robots, Maple raised her hand to get his attention. Yes, little listener, random test ID number, you have a question about the robots? President Mike asked, wondering what it was. He was surprised that someone noticed the purposeful discrepancy between the pamphlets and his explanation. It was done by him to see later who was properly listening to him and who did not listen to his explanation. However, he was soon going to be proven wrong about what he thought she was going to be pointing out. Can I eat the robots to earn points? And if I cannot, then can I eat the one worth 0 points? Maple asked, his smiling as though this was a normal question. President Mike was unsure of how to respond to such a question, especially when in front of the public like this. Granted, he knew the girl did have what most would not call a normal childhood, but even he thought she would have learned to read a room by this point in time. I guess you could, but I do not personally recommend it. President Mike said, laughing at the faces of the other applicants who thought this girl before them was crazy. For people like Tenya Ida, however, they were furious that this girl was treating the UA exam they dreamed of as a joke. However, due to President Mike laughing off her question after giving her a somewhat serious answer, they were all hesitant to speak up. All except for one of them anyway. If you are here to mock this exam, then I must insist you leave this instant. Also stop that very perverse behavior this instant as well. Tenya Ida shouted, pointing at Maple and Himiko after standing up to point to them. Though the redness of his face only half anger, the other half was from his embarrassment at such a public display of affection. Maple, who was too busy imaging using one robot as a grill while she marinated the one on top of it with her chipotle sauce, did not realize he spoke. Only coming out of her thoughts of a robot barbecue when Himiko began growling at Ida with the others around them backing away. Seeing that the fancy-looking kid with glasses was pointing at them from the direction Himiko was looking at made her realize he said something important. "Sorry about that, I was daydreaming about barbecue, can you repeat what you just said?" Maple asked him, poking Himiko's nose with one finger before using one of her other hands to pet her, calming her down. Himiko gladly stopped growling to nuzzle into her adorable Maple more as she remembered she would be separated from Maple soon enough. Everyone was stunned into silence at the audacity of what she just said, even present Mike, who instantly after a moment of being stunned began holding back his laughter. Ochiko was less stunned as she was busy focusing on not drooling at her now own daydream of barbecue with her parents. Momo, who due to her parents' strict dieting was having an easier time than Ochiko holding herself back from drooling. But that was more because the sight of Maple and Himiko caused her to dream about one of her Yuri shoujo manga that had a new volume come out today. Note to self, make sure to lock my door when I get home today. Momo thought to herself, more focused on holding back a nosebleed. Rikido Sato was now wondering if he should ask her to test out his new cake recipe back at his home/family bakery. This however simply made Tenya Ida more upset that not only was he ignored, but she amped up her public display of affection. People seeing he was about to explode when suddenly one of the other students spoke up, getting his attention. "Why you angry? That is normal way to show love in America." Pony Tsunatori asked him in broken Japanese, making it clear she was from America with what she said. This made a good amount of people snicker at him as he was just told off unintentionally by a foreigner applying to UA. Fortunately for him, or unfortunately, Aizawa, who was watching from the camera room, came down to wrap him up in his capture gear. "I understand you caring about propriety, but this is UA. At this school, from the students to the teachers, it is encouraged to break tradition, to go beyond your limits. So instead of lecturing someone about how to be a proper hero, I suggest you try to get into UA and learn to become a hero first yourself, boy," Aizawa stated, staring his friend Tensei younger brother in the eyes. With a sigh of disappointment he let go of the boy and walked out, already seeing the headaches of today piling up before him. Nizu later questioned him about why he decided to go so far with his friend's younger brother, as the child was shocked into silence. So he made it clear he did not want present Mike to take it easy on this kid, or else he may cause another fight later during the lunch break between the written and physical exams. That, and he personally hated people like that who practically tried to jam their own worldview down the throats of others. UA exam day, written exam. Nizu has always kept an eye on those cheating, but what he nor Aizawa ever released to the public or other teachers was why they kept an eye on the cheaters. Most assumed it was because they did not want to allow cheaters to enter the school, as they would likely to cause trouble. In actuality, they watched them closely to see who was able to sneakily cheat without the others' teachers reporting. This was to see who was the most capable people in terms of information gathering or technical control of their quirks to do so. Some were Kyokujiro, or Mizo Shuji, who discreetly listened to everyone with great success as they used this information to supplement their already obtained knowledge. One that was a bit confusing was Denki Kaminari, who was skilled enough to use his disconnected headphones with a small metal rod attached to act as an antenna. He used his electricity quirk in combination with this to pick up on the almost silent whispering of others. Though due to his baseline intelligence, even with this what they assumed was a rare slide of brilliance, he still just barely passed. Moving on to a less contradicting student, they found Tenya Ida, who was unable to focus, most likely due to what Aizawa said to him earlier. However, if he was so inept so as to be thrown off this easily, then perhaps he was too stiff of an individual to become a hero. After all, if there was one thing Nizu and Aizawa had learned from years of experience, it was the importance of adaptability. They saw many heroes die out in the field due to things like relying solely on their quirk or simply not knowing how to use anything other than brute force. Himiko used a method not involving her quirk, but rather her metal pen she shined into a reflective surface. This impressed them as she would angle it just slightly enough to spy on the answers of those directly around her. Granted, they knew she was smart enough to pass on her own knowledge, but it seemed she decided to play it safe and confirm her answers. Maple, to no one's surprise among the staff, got second only to izukumidoriya when he took the written exam on the support course exam day the week prior. Though the final bit of information the hero and support course were being tested on was slightly different. It was mostly the same test, just with slightly different wording for the questions. As the hero course students usually needed to handicap due to most applicants being more on the physical quirk side than the mental. One student however with not a combative quirk but rather a mind-controlling one got the top 10 on the written exam. UA exam day cafeteria. People were mentally wiped from the strenuous exam they just did, so needless to say they were grateful for this hour break before the physical. Maple, deciding it was better to only come up for food once, had one tray in each hand stacked with enough food for 2 people. Himiko had 2 trays herself, but one was for Maple as she only needed one, as it seemed Maple appetite increased if in this half-transformation for a while. People were shocked to see how much Maple was eating, only for a girl with black hair and onyx eyes to sit down with the 2. Greetings, my name is Momo Yaoyorozu. If you don't mind me asking, do you have a height metabolism? She asked them after introducing herself. These girls seemed nice, well, nice so long as you did not try to pick a fight with them. Though she was genuinely curious how high this girl's metabolism was for her to need to eat so much food. Yup. I burn through nutrients and calories quick, so I need to eat a lot to compensate for it. Maple said after swallowing a mouthful of food. She could not help but get the feeling that this girl reminded her of Iz with how well put together she appeared. Oh, I almost forgot. My name is Maple Usagiyama and this is my friend, Himiko Toga. She smiled cheerfully as she introduced them to this girl before them. Momo was surprised to find out they were just friends, but when they described how they interacted usually steam nearly came out of the young heiress' head. After further explanation from them, it seemed Maple thought things like light kisses or sharing a bed together was normal best friend stuff. Himiko however seemed happy with waiting for Maple to realize that they were behaving like a couple, so Momo kept her counsel to herself. Though that being said, she felt as though she had seen these girls somewhere before, but could not place where. Unfortunately for her, she did not figure it out by the time they all had to leave to go do the tests. UA exam day test grounda. Himiko was currently stretching, with her choice of clothing gathering quite the bit of attention for the boys. A few who did not notice her with Maple cause they came earlier and were seating at the complexity opposite end of the lecture hall had gone up to ask her out after. Naturally Himiko turned them away with words, till one of them was a little too insistent and tried to grope her by wrapping his arm around her shoulder. For him she swiftly pulled out a hunting knife and brought the tip to his Adam's apple, preventing him from even gulping. Take your hands off of me or else I am getting a surprise snack from you before you bleed out. She said, confusing him but scaring him enough he got her point. Unfortunately for her, someone else was coming up to her. This person was the same JRK who yelled at them earlier. It is not proper heroic behavior to assault other candidates or students. Tenya Ida said, scolding her for her behavior just now. To him he had no idea was someone so violent and clearly deranged would want to become a hero. But as someone who comes from a family of honorable heroes, he will make sure he fulfills his responsibility of protecting the future of heroics. Himiko looked at him with a deadpan stare at how absurd this walking rule book of a JRK was being. So you are saying I should let him continue to try and RPE me cause he was applying to be a hero? Himiko asked him as he looked like he was about to stagger backwards. Unfortunately for him, she made sure to say it loud enough that everyone could hear her. As a result the guys got as much distance from the girls as possible, while the girls all stared daggers at Tenya Ida for defending a creep. Knowing any attempt to correct himself would likely only cause himself further ire, so he kept quiet and walked away. Due to the distance the boys were making, all the girls managed to get to the very front of the pack with the boys a good distance behind. Present Mike was barely holding back his laughter as the pushy Casanovas had made things harder for the rest of the guys here. When the buzzer sounded the girls were off, with the guys just behind them as a few with speed quirks quickly caught up. UA exam day test ground B. Maple was going through her mental checklist of what she was told to do before going into a fight if given the chance. So first she stretched her arms, all four of them, as well as her legs, back, and tail. Though the tail being a little stiff after being transformed all morning was little to none in terms of an actual handicap. Even so, she had the time, so she did. However, this did not stop some of the guys from checking her out from behind. Despite the fact that her enormous stature was enough to send them all running if she were to approach them. Ejiro Kirishima, however, was impressed with how straightforward she was about herself, not holding back. In his humble opinion, she was manly. Kaminari was feeling pity for her, thinking she got even lower than he did on the written test, thinking she needed to ace the physical to pass. In reality, for the electric teen, and rather unfortunately for him, she had actually gotten the highest written score on the normal exam. Nizu had done a different written test for the recommended students and the normal applicants to properly test them. Ironically enough, it was already clear that in terms of percentage of who took which test, the recommended had more failures. This fortunately helped Nizu to weed out the muscle heads or the lazy fools who thought they could ace it just cause they were recommended by a hero. With her chipotle buckets sealed shut and hanging by her neck, Maple ran on all fours as soon as the buzzer sounded. In fact, she was so fast to start she broke the gate off the hinges before they even fully opened. A three-pointer immediately fired a missile at her, only for her to swallow it whole. UA exam day. Teacher monitoring room. The teachers were already slapping their faces as the younger Ida's sibling just assumed a person guilt without actually doing anything to check. This was met with strong groans from those who tried to defend him earlier, from Aizawa, who had now snorted in mild triumph as his prediction was right. Mirko and Midnight, however, were glaring daggers at the screen as if trying to burn a physical hole through his skull via the TV screen. Calm down, you two. I understand how angry you must be as mothers, but please allow us to deal with this if he makes it necessary. Nizu said for the true message to be lost on all except Aizawa. The underground hero could tell that Nizu meant that if he passed the exam, then he would have Aizawa iron out the kinks in his rather stiff and confrontational personality. With a heavy sigh, they moved on to the next issue, sort of an issue. Everyone was blown away with how Maple was so eager to blow through this exam, that she literally blew the gate off the hinges. As usual, it was with no damage done to her skin other than a little bit of dirt, which was blown off by a missile. She ate. Yes, they had to double-check their eyes, but she ate the missile like one would slurp a noodle, leaving a trail of smoke coming from her ears, nose, mouth, and eyes. After a minute or so, Snipe had realized something that was rather alarming. "I don't she can see right now?" he asked, giving an unsure pause midway through. Unfortunately for everyone there, Nizu and Aizawa had regrettably agreed with the cowboy hero analysis. This was a potential problem. Himiko in her test ground, on the other hand, was moving flawlessly, so much it seemed the other contestants had mistaken her quirk as some sort of physical enchantment. Though she was being rather cruel as to snag points from the guys who were troubling her by finishing off the bots they required 2 hits to destroy. She especially went after Tenya Ida targets the most. Normally they would never condone such behavior, but unfortunately the boys in this instance deserved it. UA exam day test grounda. Bursting ahead of the other girls, Himiko was immediately met with a group of one-pointers racing towards her. As it swung at, she grabbed its arm. Leaping forward, she slammed both feet into the upper part of its chst. This caused it to flip onto its back. With a quick twist of its arm, she broke it, setting off a few shots at the three-pointer behind them. Lucky she aimed properly, as some of the bullets actually went into the missile launchers on its back. Due to the swift response, it had loaded a missile ready to fire. The results of these two things: it exploded gloriously as bullets from the one-pointer met the missiles from the three-pointer. Hitting the disable button on the back of its head as she got up, she ran at the other, hunting knife ready in each hand. She decapitated the robots, who got momentarily distracted by their comrade behind them exploding. With 5 points as a good base, she put her knives away and got her throwing knives ready, switching to distance attacks for the 1- and 3-pointer robots. Now she knew their weak points. Since she had neither the strength nor the equipment required to deal with the 2 pointers directly, she would avoid them. Of course, if she saw some of the boys from earlier one hit away from claiming points, she would finish it off for them. Then she spotted him. Lucky for the girls, she had a soft spot and helped them here and there, earning a grateful wave or a thumbs up from them. For Tenya Ida, he was losing his mind, as any target he did not destroy in one attack would be finished off with a knife throw from the blonde girl from earlier. First the incident in the auditorium, now this. How rude can one person be? I will make sure to give her a lecture afterwards about her behavior. He thought, not realizing once yet how rude he has been. Even now he thought the reason he was scolded earlier by that man who he assumed was a teacher was because he failed to correct their behavior. UA Exam Day Test Ground B. Maple had likened the missile to downing a whole bag of the candy that pops in your mouth, all at once but with a zesty aftertaste. What she did not realize was that eating that missile ended up blowing her eyes to literal watery jello on the ground before her. However, this was not the only thing damaged by the explosive power by the missile she had eaten. Though her regeneration powers kept her alive and were beginning to fully heal her, Maple had taken considerable brain damage. As a result, she was unable to remember where she was or what to do, except a single jumbled memory from earlier. I eat robots, earn points, was all she could think at the moment. Despite not knowing what points currently were, she at least understood the eat robots part. As a result, her head had transformed into full monster head in order to decelerate her recovery enough to regain her senses. Due to the rushed transformation, her vision was blurry, so all she could do was attack anything resembling the 4 images that came to mind. This, however, meant no regard for other students trying the exam, as she ran through on all 4s, biting her way through all opponents. Like a raging bull charging forward, everyone got out of her way in fear of her trampling them. The results were her swiftly gaining points, having 107 villian points by the time she had healed her brain enough to realize where she was at the 5-minute mark, going off just as the 0-pointer emerged. Confused Maple, with her normal head back, looked around and saw the 0-pointer trudging forward after the contestants. At first she was going to ignore it as she felt rather full. That was when she heard a cry for help, and saw a girl with a brown bobcat haircut trapped under rubble. So Maple ran against the crowd of running students, forcing them to make an open rather for her so as to not be knocked down. Unable to pull her out of the rubble without hurting the girl, Maple had decided to try and beat it standing her ground. However, Nizu made this one model in particular Maple proof. As a result, her fire breath did nothing and her acid vomit slipped right off of it, grinding her teeth as she tried throwing rubble at its feet to slow it down further. Though all this managed to buy her another minute or so, it was still going forward. Thinking back to how easy it was for her to get her demon form, it struck her. I can beat it like how I beat the demon, and this time I have sauce to add to his flavor. Maple grinned fiendishly as she licked her lips, trembling at the thought of how good this was gonna taste. Ochiko, seeing the back of the large girl from before trying to defend her, she was crying tears of both joy as well as great regret. She kept on imploring the girl to leave her behind and pass the exam, but she ignored Ochiko and simply kept attacking the behemoth. Eventually she began to tremble. Ochiko took this as a sign that her attempted savior was now frozen in fear at being unable to do anything. Then, in a final attempt to defend her, she had jumped up at the robot only to slap into the building beside the robot as its hands went straight through the building. Crying now only in regret at how she had most likely died from such an attack, she was taken aback when what felt like a minute had passed without her getting crushed. Opening her eyes, the gravity quirk user saw the robot spinning its upper body as it froze in place, banging its head as sparks flew from everywhere on its body. Eventually, just before the time ended, it fell with the girl who she had thought was dead pulling herself out. Uninjured but with a bloated stomach, covered in oil and chipotle sauce. As she was complaining about having a stomach ache later from overeating. Unsure of what she just saw, she had passed out on the spot. UA exam day. Teacher monitoring room. Utter horror was what the teachers watching the exam were feeling at the sight of Maple getting slammed into a building and not reappearing. They thought it was bad enough to see her face nearly explode as she ran around in what looked to be like a possibly complete haze. But to see her not getting up after being crushed by the zero-pointer, Midnight, Izuku, and Mirko were shaking with the two former on the brink of tears. As they were about to tell Mike to destroy the zero-pointer, they saw it behaving weirdly. That was when a few minutes later Maple had emerged from within it looking she ate an entire buffet, table and all. Did she just eat it to death from the inside out? Power Loader asked in shock. The thought of this happening never once crossing the support course teacher mind in all his years at this school. Nizu simply chuckled at the odd display. Needless to say they gave her full rescue marks plus a 50% bonus for doing so while the entirety of her block ran away. Normally the passing mark is 40, but they would at least give a break and consider the students who got at least 20 marks for the hero course. But for the disgraceful who ran away from those in danger, none who got under 40 were not even considered for the hero course. Fortunately for them, Himiko did not stress them out too much as she had dealt with the zero-pointer in a more normal fashion. Well, at least more normal when compared to Maple. Then again, that was not saying much considering how far off Maple was from normal already. What Himiko did however was beyond what they saw from even All Might during his exam video. Does anyone argue with giving the two who took it down 60 points while the others all receive 40 points? Nizu asked, getting no objections, to which he did not find surprising. In the opinion of the mouse-bear-dog thing that was the principal, he felt they definitely deserved to pass for showing they understand what it meant to be a hero. All Might, however, was deeply thinking on whether or not he should ask her first instead of Mirio like he originally intended. UA exam day test grounda. Himiko had lost track of her points, was sure she had enough points to pass despite not knowing the actual number. The actual number of her score due to her stealing points here and there from the boys had resulted in her getting 74 villian points when the zero-pointer had showed itself. Unfortunately, there were a few other contestants trapped in rubble from the earlier fighting that are going to be in its way. Irritatingly, the stampede of scared people forced her to struggle to get to an alleyway before a vine had pulled her into her original destination. "Are you all right?" A girl with vines for hair asked her as she checked her arms quickly. With her were three other girls, a girl with pink skin and hair, a girl with elongated earlobes with ear jacks, and a black-haired girl with no expression. "I am fine thanks, but I need to get back there," Himiko said, pointing in the direction of the zero-pointer. This confused the girls and caused the one she would later find to be Asmina Ashido to ask why go there instead of getting points. When she told them that she saw people trapped there under rubble earlier, at first they tried to placate her by saying they probably got free by now. But what if they didn't get free? Himiko shouted back in frustration, shocking them. "The reason I wanted to become a hero was because I never wanted to be helpless again, because I wanted to save people." Though she did not intend to, her passionate words caught the hearts of the four girls who all agreed to help her and exchanged names. Remembering Izuku lessons on basic battle strategy, she came up with an idea that she felt would work. She would distract the zero-pointer on the left side while Mina used her acid along with Kyoka sound attack to create a trench. Hopefully she would distract it long enough for them to complete this while Ibra moved the rubble off of the trapped victims. Yui would throw rubble using her quirk to distract it from the right side, assisting her in distracting it. When they got there they saw the people still trapped under the rubble. Unfortunately for them, before the zero-pointer could notice the two people getting to work immediately, they carried out the plan. However, it did not go so well as Ibra deemed it too unsafe to move them after removing the rubble. They had broken legs that they might make worse if they tried to carry them out of here with her vines. Which was unfortunately the only way they would be able to carry them out of here. Unfortunately, the trench would at best buy them maybe 30 or so seconds considering the size of the metal behemoth. Racking her brain, she had only one idea. "Yui, I need to know how big you can make an object," Himiko asked as she explained her suicidal attack. Ibra, despite objecting to the risk they would take, agreed to do it if Yui was willing to do it, in which she agreed. Taking a deep breath to prepare herself, Ibra used her vines to throw her comrades over the head of the incoming zero-pointer. With Yui holding on to Himiko twisted them around the fist intent on block them. Once past at last defense, Yui used her quirk. Holding on to the hunting knife, she enlarged it to the point where it literally splitting the head of the zero-pointed. With the force of their landing on it sending it falling back in defeat just as the timer sounded. Ibra, with the help of Kyoka making her vines vibrate, gently caught them from falling so high with seemingly no repercussions. Though to be safe they all insisted the two girls go to the nurse's office afterwards to get themselves checked out. UA Exam Day Test Ground B. Inside of the zero-pointer. What had looked like Maple being wiped out by the zero-pointer, was actually her jumping into a space in the arm joint and crawling her way in. Once she was in what she thought was the head, she saw a pile of circuit boards that resembled a table. Deciding it was fate, she ripped off several metal orbs that she did now know was responsible for transmitting video and audio info to the main processor. As a result, the safety protocol triggered, stopping the metal beast in its tracks as a precaution since it could not see. Opening one of her buckets of chipotle sauce, she began dipping the orbs in it, relishing in the flavor of it. The metal itself reminded her of BLD but a tad less sweet, kind of like dark chocolate. When the sparks hit her tongue though, it had given the strong taste a slightly sweeter taste. Then it was followed by the chipotle sauce, adding some spice and zest to it. However, some of the sauce and her drool leaked onto her table. This table was actually its main brain of the zero-pointer, as a result it went haywire, smashing its head and other such things. Maple, however, was oblivious to all of this. As a result, when she was thrown forwards down into the CHST cavity, with her chipotle sauce spilling everywhere from both buckets, she was about to cry, when she realized that it now made all the cables resemble spaghetti. Liking how the motor oil mixed well with the chipotle sauce and was quite happy, eating her way though anything covered in chipotle sauce. Eventually she ate through so much that it could not function any further, resulting in it falling as far as she could tell. So full she fell asleep as soon as she had eaten her last little bit to freedom, changing back into a less than modest state. Fortunately, Recovery Girl had some medical robots take her unconscious form away before anyone conscious could see her. UE Entrance Exam Meeting. Currently those who were seated were all those monitoring the exam, except for Mirko and Midnight, as they would have a clear bias this year. As such, on the left side of the table was Cementos, Snipe, Ectoplasm, and Vlad King. On the right side of the table was present Mike, Power Loader, Hound Dog, and Eraserhead. At one end of the table between either side was Nizu, with Recovery Girl and All Might at the other end. Currently they were in a bit of a stalemate for an argument on who should go to Aizawa or Vlad, as these were all students who were already approved for passing. As I said before, Mina Ashido, Kyoka Jiro, Yui Kodai, Ibra Shiozaki, Ejiro Kurishima, Tetsu, and Mirko, 2 girls will be in my class no matter what. Aizawa said, glaring back at the red-faced Vlad King. Besides the fact that I am best suited to train those girls to control their BLD quirks in actual combat, those students showed exceptional teamwork. It makes more sense for me to teach them than you with your survival of the fittest view. Vlad King yelled back at his longtime rival and pain in the butt of a fellow teacher. Those hardening quirk users need to learn to keep a level head instead of charging in all the time. Your brash teaching style will not help fix their reckless attitudes. Also, those girls do not need the hand holding you do. They need to be properly pushed forward to make the best use of their potential. Aizawa said with a sigh after it how obscenely stubborn his self-declared rival always is. Besides that, if those 2 girls lose control of their natural bloodlust, unlike your quirk, my quirk can shut it down instantly. He said, knowing that the main reason he wanted to teach them was cause he was looking for a successor. My quirk may not be able to immediately stop their quirks, but I know how to deal with BLD quirk users better than you do in order to prevent that from happening. Vlad King shouted back, slamming his 2 closed fists on the table, breaking off a chunk of the table, as always. Nizu internally sighed, as they had similar argument almost every year, though in this case both brought up valid points. Unfortunately, as many times in the past, he had to side with Aizawa in this case, though it was only the principal's own observations from the brief exam. Mina Ashido had natural physical talent, but lacked the self-control to prevent herself from getting caught up and distracted in a fight. Kyoka Jiro, though she has excellent self-control to go with her tough-as-nails attitude, she was severely underdeveloped physically due to quirk reliance. Yui Kodai by all accounts had appeared perfect at a first glance, showed a critical flaw for a hero, she was hesitant when it came time to act earlier. Though Ibra Shiozaki never hesitated to save people, her pacifist ideals were unrealistic as a hero, where fighting a villian into SBMSN may be the only way to save a civilian. My apologies Vlad, but those students he mentioned will be going to him. Nizu said, knowing he was not gonna stop hearing the end of this meeting for weeks to come. As well as those girls, the last 3 female students I want in 1A are Momo Yaoyorozu, Achiko Uraraka, and Reina Lopez. Aizawa said with Midnight luckily not here to make a wise crack about him making a classroom HRM for himself. Nizu prompted him to give a satisfactory explanation for why he should let him choose them over Vlad King, hoping it would pacify the BLD hero for him. First let's start with Yaoyorozu. Her quirk is impressive, but due to her upbringing she is too straightforward with her fighting. She needs to learn to be more flexible and open-minded. Can you say that you can do that, Vlad? He said, raising a brow as the BLD hero gave a grumbled no. Then there is Achiko Uraraka and Reina Lopez, who quirks lack raw combat power, but I believe I can train to be on par with most combat-oriented quirks by the end of their first year. Aizawa said, seeing his rival concede to that point. After some back and forth, everyone there agreed on the final list for the 2 classes. Class 1A roster. 1. Mina Ashido. 2. Kyoka Jiro. 3. Denki Kaminari. 4. Eijiro Kirishima. 5. Koji Koda. 6. Yui Kodai. 7. Shurhei Kurwaro. 8. Reina Lopez. 9. Minoru Mineta. 10. Nito Minoma. 11. Mashireo Ojiro. 12. Ibra Shiozaki. 13. Mizo Shoji. 14. Tetsu. 15. Shoto Todoroki. 16. Himiko Toga. 17. Fumikage Tokoyami. 18. Achiko Uraraka. 19. Maple Usagiyama. 20. Momo Yaoyorozu. Class 1B roster. 1. Yuga Aoyama. 2. Tsuyu Azui. 3. Yosetsu Aways. 4. Kojiro Bondo. 5. Manga Fukudashi. 6. Toru Hagakure. 7. Juzo Hananuki. 8. Tenya Ida. 9. Senkaibara. 10. Toguru Kamakiri. 11. Itsuka Kendo. 12. Kinoko Komori. 13. Hiryu Rin. 14. Rikido Sato. 15. Narenjiki Shota. 16. Setsuna Tokeichi. 17. Jiroda Shishida. 18. Koziai Tsuburaba. 19. Pony Tsunatori. 20. Reiko Yanagi. Tokyo. Mirko and Midnight did not need to worry about letters being sent home to the girls, as Nizu just gave the discs for them. At the kitchen table, Mirko and Midnight turned to all 3 of them to discuss some things before they start making dinner. When we are at school you have to call us by our hero names or our last names. Namiri will still be going by her former last name Kayama, so the students do not mix us up. Mirko said, making sure to hold her stare on Maple. Naturally the others also did this, as they were all aware of Maple and her somewhat lack of social awareness. Maple, puffing out her cheeks and pretending to be hurt, confirmed she understood before getting head pats, becoming instantly happy again. UA. Mirko had to go in for teaching lessons from Nizu for the month and a half prior, as she had never even had a sidekick before. To her surprise, the blonde skeleton-like man, whom she was wondering who he was to be watching the entrance exam, turned out be All Might. The heroine was shocked but was given the same brief explanation about his injury and current state the other teachers were told. When Nizu told her that once word got out that All Might as well as her would be teaching at UA that things would get crazy, well, she believed the mouse. After all, in less than a literal minute of them announcing it on UA website, social media was blowing up with comments about her. So she acknowledged that it was necessary to make sure she did not screw up too badly for the media to smell BLD. Though All Might kept on asking her questions about Himiko here and there, a bit odd, but to be fair, her girls both gave one hell of a performance. Himiko and Maple bedroom. Maple, Himiko, and Izuku were now watching the footage from their acceptance letters in the room of the two girls. Currently their mothers were doing some special bonding between them, so they knew they could watch this without them talking over it. Starting with Maple disc first, a hologram of All Might appeared, startling and exciting them all. Congratulations, Maple Usagiyama. It is my honor today to tell you that you had not only passed the written exam with a perfect score at number 1 on it, but you also passed the physical exam, also having claimed the new entrance exam record. Your final score was a grand total of 107 villian points with 60 rescue points, pushing you past my previous score of 137 points. All Might said, getting them excited as Maple had surpassed All Might's score. However, the video continued, which was fortunate for the two girls as they had no idea there was rescue points. What grabbed out attention most, which surprisingly enough was not your appetite, he said, making Himiko and Izuku snicker as Maple got pouty with them for laughing at the strategy that made her a legend in her old life. It was rather your fearless spirit that stood against the 0-pointer to save the girl who was trapped under rubble. All Might finished as the video cut a clip of her holding off the 0-pointer before fighting it via her stomach. Oh yeah. I almost forgot I saved her. Maple thought to herself, but did not vocalize as it would be too much for the two with her to take. Also, it is fortunate that Ochiko Uraraka would never find out how the girl who saved her life forgot about her. Yeah, no, that would definitely be a major blow to the gravity users' self-confidence if they ever found out the truth. Cutting back to All Might, he continued talking. It is for this reason that you may hold your head high as a true hero. I hope to see your progress for many years to come, young hero. I welcome you to Class 1A. He said, cutting the clip off as the recording ended. Needless to say, Izuku was all over her at being praised by All Might. Though with how kind his big sister was, he would have been more shocked if the number 1 hero did not recognize her. Next came up Himiko video with All Might as they expected also showing up in it. Congratulations, Himiko Toga. It is my honor today to tell you that you had not only passed the written exam with a nearly perfect score at number 2 on it, but you also passed the physical exam, also having claimed an impressive final score of 74 villian points with 60 rescue points, getting a final score of 134 points, just a few points below my previous score. All Might said, making them all excited that she passed with so many points. Though I must say, as the symbol of peace, I was truly proud by how you gathered all those girls together in order to save those other participants. Though many think nowadays they need to rely solely on their own powers, the true heroes are those who use teamwork to save those in need of help. And I assure you that your deeds did not go unappreciated. All Might said as the video cut to the two boys, who they would later find out were in Class 1B, asking if they can give their points to the girls who lost time by saving them. You managed to inspire not just your temporary allies, but others around you without even trying. Smile proudly as you step through the halls of UA come next semester, for you shall be part of Class 1A. I have faith you will develop into the hero that this school, know what this very world needs in the next generation to come. All Might said that Himiko could have sworn had a whirlwind of restrained emotions behind it. However, neither of the other two noticed going crazy over what he said about her at the end, so she kept it to herself for now. Then came Izuku video, oddly enough, as he was already told he was given a spot in the course due to making his sister's armor/clothes. I must say, young man, the armor and clothes you made were beyond impressive. Just observe them fighting and you will see what I mean. Power Loader said as the video switched to clips his sisters taking damage and coming out unscathed. Normally making clothes that incorporate the DNA of the users are weaker as a result due to current manufacturing methods by companies. But the production method you came up with allowed the material to retain its full strength. This is only one of your 2 revolutionary designs and will allow us to make great leaps in the future. Fortunately for you who did not seem to realize it, me and your mother patented them for you under your name. He said, shocking Isuku as he thought what he did was nothing special compared to the pros. Then it clicked for all 3 siblings before they continued speaking that he said one of 2, so what was the second? As for the second design, that 3-layer folding armor that retains body heat of the user had been requested by countless pro heroes across the world working in colder areas. Though your parents having already figured fulfilling those requests would take up too much of your time, so they signed a contract with my own company. Once costs of the specialized materials are subtracted, we keep 20% of the profit while you keep the other 80%. The DNA impeded fabric is however something that cannot be easily done by anyone working for me, despite the fact I hired the best from around the world. So those requests will need to be handled by you personally, but fortunately those are like drops of water in the ocean of requests for the 3-layered body heat retaining armor you made. Not sure if they told you this, but assuming they did not tell you about the design patents, so I will let you know now about the other obvious thing. Your parents made a savings account for you to store it all so when you graduate you can start your own business. Power Loader told them, making Isuku decided to tell his 2 moms the difference between good surprises and almost heart attack inducing surprises. So as someone who had trouble when he started his own company, I suggest you take some business courses in your 2nd year. Since I recommended to Nizu to put you into the 3rd year's courses required for the support course. And if you are worried about your 1st and 2nd year credits, do not worry, Nizu took care of it already by having you do the courses before coming to UA. Remember all of that preschool homework he had you doing to catch you up to the minimum standards of UA? He said, making Isuku realize now how long they were planning to spring this on him. When the semester starts, I welcome you to UA, young man. I know you will be the greatest support hero society could ever ask for. Power Loader said, cutting the video off. Izuku stormed off to his mother's room to give them a lecture of what was okay to do behind people's backs, ignoring the warning from his 2 sisters. When he slammed the door open, he saw a certain scene that he had forgotten in his extremely rare fit of anger was happening and why they chose to watch the videos now. The 18+ hero spanking the rabbit hero, as said rabbit hero was sliding up then down on a strap on the 18+ hero was wearing. Fortunately for him, the 2 had the presence of mind to notice him and stop after he fainted from embarrassment of walking in on them like this to help him. This at the very least served as a reminder to him as to why he had to always knock before entering either his mother's or sister's rooms before entering Ida family living room. Everyone in the Ida family, including the eldest son Tensei, had gathered together to find out the results of the exam. However, they were all currently in shock at the news they had received, with Tensei silently scolding himself for not teaching his brother better. The older 2 members of the Ida family, however, were far less humble. In fact, they were angry at how Nizu treated one of the oldest hero families in Japan. Needless to say, unlike Tensei, who was humbled by Nizu and his friends when he was younger, his parents were not, as they were still thinking they were above the commoners, as they described the majority of the civilian population. Where did I go wrong with Tenya? Hopefully Nizu can actually do it, he thought, as his little brother was still denying the reality that he had been in the wrong. When the video was played, after they had made tea, they played the acceptance letter, expecting All Might as Midnight had forewarned Tensei about. As a result, they were all quite shocked to see Nizu doing this instead, confusing the current ingenium. The parents and younger brother, who were still in the dark at the time, thought that Principal Nizu simply did theirs especially cause of their family legacy. As such, the shock was momentary before replaced immediately with soon-to-crumble smiles. Greeting Tenya. Ida, am I mouse? Am I a dog? Am I a bear? No, I am the principal of UA. Nizu did his usual greeting that made the parents chuckle at the opening joke they thought he did to try and relieve their tensions. They were wrong, for with Nizu there no mercy, and Tensei Ida could tell by the look on the animal's face that he was quite upset in the recording. I wish to congratulate you personally about passing the written with flying colors claiming 5th place. He said, making the parents slightly less happy with such news, but that just meant there were 4 other students in 1A who could keep up with their son on an intellectual level. For Tenya Ida however he was shocked that he came in 5th place as an exam for regular people should have been a guaranteed perfect score for someone from a prestigious family like his. As for the physical exam, you got 66 villian points in. This pause confused the parents as UA only implemented rescue points after Nana Shimura shortly became a teacher there. Normally women would not change UA tradition like that, but as the number 1 hero at the time they took her words seriously when she said rescue points were needed to judge them as well. However, for a few short years after her death, they stopped the rescue before bringing them back. As a result the father of the Ida brothers never had rescue points on his exam. 0 rescue points. If you had simply tried to help those 2 boys trapped under the rubble instead of ignoring them you probably would have gotten between 40 to 60 rescue points like these girls did. Nizu said, shaking his head slightly in disappointment while still maintaining his perfect smile. The video then changed to show the girl he scolded before the fighting began with 4 other girls saving the 2 victims. As such you passed with normally more than enough points to get into class 1A. Nizu said, alerting Tensei something was up when said those specifically chosen words. However, between your lack of willingness to save others and how you antagonized the other potential students before by throwing your weight around, I am afraid that will not be an option for you. He then said before it had switched to clips of Tenya Ida scolding or berating others over the littlest of things. To the parents it just looked like their son educating these commoners on how to handle themselves better. Tensei however was holding his head in his hands, peeking through his fingers at the sight of his brother essentially bullying others. Tenya Ida, let me make it clear to you. Tensei froze up at the sight of Nizu's tail straightening out as he leaned forward. Just as Aizawa told you after he tied you up. You are not a hero. You have no right to tell others how to behave as proper heroes when you yourself are still a student like them. Though I did consider throwing you into general education and seeing if you could prove yourself at the sports festival. Another teacher volunteered a different idea. Tensei let out a sigh of relief that someone convinced Nizu to give him a second chance. Vlad King had offered to attempt to straighten you out for me. As such you will be sent to 1B, and if I do not see your attitude has not improved before the sports festival. Nizu trailed off as Tensei recalled the rules for it. Depending on their results during it, a student from any of the other non-hero courses could end up replacing you, young man. With that, enjoy your evening or day depending on when you are watching this, and I will see you in class 1B. Tensei's stomach dropped as whenever Nizu gave an ultimatum like that, it meant he was almost sure the student would fail. UA. When the family of 5 reached UA, Midnight and Mirko took the teachers back in trance while the 3 kids went through the front. Though Maple was showing up in her shorter normal form, ironically enough this meant the youngest among them was also the tallest. As a result, Maple's eyes were at Himiko Chin, while her eyes were at the top of Izuku's chst. Then, so as to continue the height hierarchy, Himiko's eyes were just as Izuku nose, so not as short as Maple but still just a tad shorter. Once the trio made it into the main building they split up into 2 different paths as Izuku was headed to the support class. Himiko and Maple made their way to the class with Himiko holding her friend from behind, resting her head on top of Maple's head as they walked in blissful silence, minus her humming, that is. Maple, who was used this clinginess from Sally, simply went along with it, ignoring the few stares they were getting from the other few early arrivers. Most of them being 2nd and 3rd years, one of them being a girl with long periwinkle hair. She had a lot of questions for them. Fortunately they arrived very early due to coming with their moms, so they had time to spare. Finding out she a 3rd-year classmate before ending their talk, they exchanged numbers and took a selfie with her. When she left, however, that was because she was dragged away from them by a guy with blonde hair that looked like one of those generic All Might knockoff dolls they saw once. On the way they ended up seeing the guy with the glasses that yelled at them. Unfortunately for them, he also noticed them. "I see you have arrived early as well, and yet again displaying an inappropriate amount of affection in public. On top of that, you are cheating on your partner with this short girl," he yelled, chopping his arms in the air as he began lecturing them both. He was splitting it between lecturing Himiko on the ramifications on ADLT and public indecency. As for Maple, who he had yet to realize was the same girl, he was lecturing her on how affairs were immoral and how she should be ashamed for trying to steal someone else's partner. Himiko was barely able to hold herself back from pulling a knife out on him only due to her currently cuddling Maple. Maple on the other hand was confused about why he accused them of cheating, not realizing that he did not recognize them. Eventually Maple, who was still tuning out Tenya Ida, had noticed Himiko twitching, making her decided to cut this off before it got bloody. Well, at least not bloody in the good way that she has become accustomed to since drinking BLD every day. Looking up at him as she needed to, with him being over a whole foot taller than her, with her eyes being just below his chest. She tugged on the sleeve of his upper arm, getting his attention, causing him to stop. "How about we take this to the classroom?" Maple asked, getting him to nod in approval. "Good idea. Since we came here early, we may as well make sure we are waiting in class," Ida said, thinking she had potential to become a proper student in the future. He also made a mental note to give them any tutoring they would need so as not to embarrass his fellow classmates along with him with their most likely abysmal grades. As they began opening the doors to the two classrooms, he realized they were opening the door to 1A. "Excuse me, but this is the 1B classroom," he said, wondering if she did not realize in her excitement she opened the wrong door. However, the look of confusion she gave him as she tilted her head gave him a bad feeling. "Yes, that is, but we need to go to 1A. Are you in class 1B? Maple asked him, as it was in reality an innocent question. However, for the bespectacled young man it was like a slap to the face as he realized that these two were welcomed into 1A. How did some delinquent and this air-headed young girl get into 1A? He thought to himself, turning it over in his head. "Well, if you ever need to come to someone for tutoring, you may always turn to me, Tenya Ida," Ida said, extending his hand into a handshake. Though he was being polite on the surface, he did have what would be called an ulterior motive in offering his aid. Thinking that if he helped this girl, who he assumed was allowed into class 1A solely due to her quirk, then they would consider him to replace the blonde when they inevitably expel her for her overly violent behavior he had witnessed firsthand on exam day. Of course, he did not realize that this was the exact kind of thinking that prevented Nizu from letting him into 1A. Maple throughout all of this did not realize he was thinking bad things about her, and Himiko gave her normal reply to such things. "I appreciate the offer, but we came in first and second for the written exam, so if we do begin having trouble then we should probably just ask the teacher directly," Maple said, smiling, not realizing she may as well punched him in the gut yet again. Tenya Ida was standing there in shock as they went into their class, trying to figure out how that delinquent had gotten a better score than him. Eventually Itsuka came to the class, seeing him standing there under the assumption he was thinking about something, and pulled him into class by his arm just minutes before the first day started. UA support class. Izuku, while on the way to his homeroom class, was worried for his two sisters, as Maple had an odd tendency to say the wrong thing when meeting people. Almost as if it was scripted by someone watching over them, as if their lives are a book they are reading. No, Izuku trust them, well, more like trust Uncle Shota to keep them in check. He thought to himself, slapping his face as remembered that they will be in his class. When he went to open the door, however, he was tackled into it by a pink blur as they fell through it. After a few minutes of struggling to get her melons out of his face and oxygen into his lungs, he finally succeeded. "Sorry there, I was so excited about baby making I just couldn't help but jump at you when I saw you just standing in front of the door," she said as she got off of him, offering a hand. Fortunately or unfortunately for him, between his mother Namuri's attitude and the needs of the other three ladies of the house to walk around nearly naked at the best of times at home, he did not immediately realize what this new girl just said. Nor did he realize that most of the class were already in the room watching them when he responded to her. "No problem, if you ever want to make a baby together let me know," he said, only realizing a few seconds after he said it what it sounded like. Turning around, a lot of his classmates were red in the face, backing away from them. Turning to face her again, he double-checked what he was hoping for. "When you say baby, you do mean support gear, right?" he asked her, figuring that is what she meant, but double-checked in case she was like his mother. She simply laughed at that like he told some sort of joke. This obviously did not allay his worries. "Of course. As their creators we need to show our inventions all the love they deserve, it's part of the job you know," she said, leaning forward into him. Mei Hatsum was never sure when it came to people, as majority she interacted with were cruel to say the least. But this guy not only made a joke to break the ice with her, but he even understood her love for inventing, as he offered to help her with making them. How could he not when he perfectly understood her when she called her inventions her babies? However, Mei would not learn it for a long time. Her interactions with him were not what she had perceived them to be. This was the beginning of story of the two inventors who would revolutionize not just society, but the very world itself. A story that would be told to future inventors, engineers, builders, and all those who lived their lives for the purpose of creating. Especially for two very little inventors with very messy green and pink hair, but that is a story for another day, as well as a very far-off story. UA Principal Nizu office. Currently sitting with Nizu in his office relaxing with him before the start of the welcoming ceremony was Midnight and Recovery Girl. Mirko had been in the teacher's lounge going over her notes again, as she was expected to give a small speech to the students. The others who did not have a homeroom to attend to were resting in the teachers after the auditorium had finally been set up. Watching the security cameras with Nizu, they were enjoying seeing the few second and third years who show up to school early for extra training back on day one. This sight made them happy to see the students working strong. They even were happy to see Maple and Himiko getting along with one of the big three. However, none of them were surprised, as Nijire Hato was as friendly as she was curious. In fact, they are happy to finally introduce her to the girls. Then their stomachs got into knots when they saw Tenya Ida confronting them. Fortunately, Maple kept calm and diffused it before Himiko lashed out. Their sighs of relief, however, turned into gut-busting laughter. Well, for Midnight and Nizu anyway. For Recovery Girl it was a soft chuckle. All of this cause Maple just casually took him down a peg without realizing it by telling the truth. It was honestly astounding to them sometimes how she managed to do such things without ever realizing it on her own. Eventually Itsuka Kendo came by and brought the young Ida into the 1B classroom, relieving them once again. UA Class 1A. When Maple and Himiko got inside, they spotted some familiar faces like Momo Yaoyorozu and Yui Kodai, who they met during the exams. Also there was a guy with blonde hair and another with gray hair and multiple webbed arms, 6 to be precise. Maple instantly took a liking to him and made a mental note to talk to him later, but first she had to greet Momo. Emo-chan. Maple called out to the black-haired girl as her and Himiko made their way to her. Though for some reason she was looking Maple weirdly. Did she have something on her face? The truth of the matter was actually that Maple never told her the truth of her quirks, so Momo had never seen her look normal before. Momo Yaoyorozu was reading her book 1 minute, when the door opened and she was greeted by Himiko with a small girl she never seen before. The heiress was trying to rack her brain for answers when she recalled that nickname Emo-chan. It was what Maple started calling her when she kept on tripping over her full name. So she let the girl call her by a nickname. On closer inspection that girl looked an awful lot like Maple, but more human and a lot smaller. Maple, your quirk is a transformation type. Momo exclaimed as it all clicked together now for her. Looking at the two girls now though, however, Momo had to struggle to hold back a nosebleed at the lovey-dove sight. At this rate I will get my fill of daily Yuri shoujo before I even need to pick up one of my books. She thought to herself as the three girls began striking up a conversation. Though it was gonna be quite the task getting used to talking to the girl nearly a whole foot shorter than her on a daily basis. Eventually, as more people came in, their group of 3 grew, first with Ibra Shiozaki, who also made sure to come early. The vine-haired girl talking happily with them about how they liked that UA handled their hero exam with rescue points. Unlike Momo, however, she had not found out yet that Maple was transformed on the day of the entrance exam, and unlike Ida, she thought there was nothing too wrong with Himiko wrapping herself around Maple. Surprisingly to most who think of the stereotypical deeply religious, in Shiozaki's eyes it was, to put it simply, a pure relationship. For her, Himiko was not doing anything inappropriate by hugging her adorable friend. So long as she did get too handsy like she did with that really tall girl during the exam debrief, then she did not mind such a display of affection like this. That changed slightly though when she found out Maple was the tall girl who was with Himiko in the auditorium, causing her to begin trying to convince them to hold back in public and maintain their purity till marriage. However, she had yet to piece together that Maple was the rose demon that devastated Mustafa a while back. That, needless to say, would cause its own mess in and of itself that would need some heavy-duty elbow grease from the teachers to fix. Shortly after Shiozaki's initial arrival came Yui Kodai, who quietly listened to the conversations with saying a few words here and there in order to participate. It was not her way to do things by standing out, and she would have been lying if she did not find the sight before her amusing. The Shiozaki girl trying to preach abstinence to the 2 friends while Momo subtly encouraged the opposite with a clear grin. It did not take her becoming a rocket scientist to figure out what exactly Momo had on her mind when she looked at the 2 girls. Mina Ashido and Kyoka Jiro both came in together just a little before class began, with Mina gushing over Maple. Jiro, on the other hand, had a bit of a more standoffish reaction due to what one of her earbuds picked up when she jokingly poked Maple with it. Her heartbeat sounded odd to the girl, like those ones she hears from those shooting video games her cousin plays. Though the girl seemed friendly enough, so the rocker credited it to a side effect of her quirk, whatever it was. Mina, on the other hand, had to be pulled off of her along with Himiko when their teacher told them to get to their seats. When Maple said both her horns looked cute as well as her pink, well, everything, she was instantly happy. Though the pink girl could swear she heard Momo huffing out of her nose, the girl looked perfectly normal when she looked, so she attested that to her weird imagination. Aizawa, after calming them all down and making sure they were all there, he brought them to the welcoming ceremony instead of the first field test. Normally he would skip it, but when Midnight threatened to share photos of his married life to his class if he failed to bring them, so he agreed. It seemed she really wanted her daughter to see her wife's speech. Vlad was even shocked to see him when they got down there. At least till he found that Mirko was giving a speech. After that, his self-proclaimed rival apologized for getting on his case, taking a fairly close guess at what Midnight or Mirko threatened to do to him. Unfortunately for the BLD Quirk user who was still single, he could not even begin to fathom what it was like to be a married teacher. Unlike Aizawa, who knew better than to give a group of teenagers ammunition to poke at him with for an entire year. Even his wife did not wear her wedding ring at her teaching job, cause, jokes aside, she agreed with him. Teenagers were some of, if not the most terrifying creatures in this world that made even their underground work seem like a picnic at times. Midnight, however, to her misfortune, did not take his advice as the only known married teacher on staff and wore her ring along with Mirko. However, unlike Mirko, who had it hidden under her combat gloves, Midnight could not hide hers. As a result, the few students who forget they were married remembered, joining the rest that remembered on teasing her. On that day he saw UA giving out more detentions on that day than they did in the last year, despite the protests of after-class celebration parties for getting in. That also helped to remind the students of how much of a SDST Midnight was, despite her starting to go a little soft since Maple came into the picture. However, when he saw a pink-haired girl clinging to Isuku, he already knew that the boy was gonna be grilled by Midnight tonight when she got back from detention duty. UA, Maple, Himiko, and Izuku starting today had slept in a little longer than the first day of school due to their moms leaving breakfast for them on the table. Unfortunately for Izuku, however, Himiko and Maple had spent the entire walk to school bugging him as a continuation from last night about the pink-haired girl that was clinging to him yesterday. Fortunately for him though, due to yesterday's mass detention that Midnight gave out to the school, she said was not going to tease him last night. However, he figured that she would most likely make up for it today like these two were right now. What did I do recently to deserve this? He thought to himself, hoping they would get to school soon. Elsewhere, Vlad King just sneezed, getting the feeling that someone was just talking about him. Oh well, my classroom projector isn't gonna fix itself, he said, sighing aloud. All he asked Mirko and Midnight's boy to come and give it a quick fix before going home. His pink-haired friend asked if he would let her do it. Heck, the girl even upgraded the picture quality on it tenfold. However, it lasted for only 5 minutes before overheating and blowing up on him. Sadly, he let them go immediately, so they left before it blew up. By the time they got to school, Izuku was ready to make a break for the support course, which he did without hesitation. Sorry, but I promised May I would help her with the baby this morning, Izuku shouted to them, not realizing he said baby. As a result, the other students around, remembering the description of Midnight and Mirko's son, realized it was him. Needless to say, rumors began to flow like the water from a busted dam before morning classes even began, with Principal Nizu hearing a few. That day all the teachers avoided his office as they heard him laughing his butt off, taking that as one of two signs. The first being that Midnight or Vlad King did something stupid again, which the few who knew of his busted projector suspected him. Or it was the second sign. That of a student pissing him off so much that he was rewatching a Harem training video of them where he personally designed the exercise. However, most people would never discover that neither was the cause. Well, sort of. Technically it was Midnight's son that did something stupid, but still just as hilarious to the animal. Getting into their class, Himiko and Maple spotted their friend group and began chatting till class began. Aizawa, taking his position up front, took stock of his class, getting no tardies. Seeing that everyone looked ready, he jumped into their first lesson. All right everyone, in order for me to properly train you all, I need a baseline for your abilities, he said, getting everyone's attention as they stood on the edge of their seats. I can already tell someone is gonna call it fun and force me to scare the hell out of them, Aizawa thought to himself as Nizu told him no expelling students on the first test, unlike previous years. That is why today we will be doing 8 of the standardized tests you did in middle school. Except today you will be using your quirks for these tests where applicable. Grab the gym uniform with your name on the bag, get to locker room, and get changed before meeting me out on the athletics field, he said, walking out to get the testing equipment. UA. In the girls' locker room, everyone was making small talk with those beside them as they got dressed, when Mina noticed Maple. CHST, your mom's let you get a tattoo, Mina exclaimed, pointing towards Maple. CHST, getting everyone attention. As a result, everyone took in the rose-shaped mark in the center of her CHST, making a few blush, saying how daring it was. Some half-jokingly, half-seriously told her they would grow eventually and how she did not need to resort to getting a tattoo. Ibra also began chastising her for it, saying how she should not have ruined her body by marking it like that. Maple, taking a breath to prepare to instill a seriousness to her voice before speaking up to everyone who was bombarding her with questions. This is not something I got for fun. I was given it to cover up a scar there over my CHST, my moms were not there when it was forced onto me, Maple said, going with the wording she was taught to use. It worked as intended, as it hinted at a past they should not delve into, silencing them all after they apologized for bugging her. The downside was now some of the girls were worried about what she had been through in the past, but like the rest did not pursue it further, though they were hoping that it would go unnoticed for a little while. The family of 5 along with the teachers knew full well the other girls in the locker room would see it eventually. Fortunately, very few people knew Mirko's real name, so when she introduced herself to the school she used her real name. As such, most people did not realize that Maple was Mirko's daughter, which also meant none connected her yet to the Rose Demon that appeared a while back. After they all got mostly dressed, the door opened with other female students coming in. Momo being the very studious and observant person she was went up to them to determine their timing. My apologies if this sounds rude, but why are you all here and what class are you from? Momo asked a girl with orange hair. Smiling back awkwardly as she had suspected that this was going to be their introduction to their sister class, she spoke up. My name is Itsuka Kendo and these are the other girls of class 1B, our teacher told us we were having a quirk apprehension test on the athletics field. She said, seeing the confused look on the other girl's face, worried she said something wrong. Deciding it was best to follow her lessons since growing up, she introduced herself and also gave a brief explanation. I am Momo Yaoyorozu, a member of class 1A, and our teacher told us we would be doing a quirk apprehension test today. She said, trailing off as it dawned onto the two girls what was going on. Both let out nervous chuckles as they realized their teachers double-booked the field time by mistake. When the two groups of students made it into the field, they saw the two teachers arguing about the use of the field for the test. Well, Vlad King seemed to be arguing anyway, with Aizawa lazily rolling high eyes making his usual monotone counter-arguments. You should have done it yesterday like normal. Vlad King shouted at his rival, veins bulging. Letting out a resigned sigh as he answered for what he counted as the 11th time so far. As I have already told you, Midnight blackmailed me to make sure my class saw Mirko's speech. He said in a drop manner, taking notice of the two converging classes. Unfortunately for them, the students noticed as well, with a few exceptionally confrontational students stepping forward. Are you trying to sabotage our evaluations? Of course a class with that delinquent at the center of their class would try such a thing. Tenya Ida exclaimed, waving his hands in his usual chopping motion, looking straight at Himiko Toga. Momo Yaoyorozu gasped at this while Himiko growled at the speedster. How dare you accuse a fellow UA student of such a thing? Momo said, infuriated by the implication of her little alone any of her classmates attempting such a thing. You want to come over here for a bite, high class? Himiko shouted, being easily held back by Maple despite the restrainer much shorter stature. Setsuna Tokeiji never one to miss the opportunity to mess with people, decidedly to back Ida with an idea in mind. If you guys think you are so tough, then put your scores where your mouths are and let's settle this SHT. Setsuna said, seeing the spark she ignited between the two classes. After much reluctance from Aizawa to agree with Vlad teasing, it was decided the two classes would compete. With both classes on board with competing against one another, they decided to pit one student against another for each test. The most students from either class to get a better score than their counterparts gets the win for that test. Naturally, Ida went up against Himiko for the 50-meter dash as he wanted to show her the real difference in their skills. Himiko agreed to it as she wanted to wipe the floor with him in what would be his best event, so that she could humiliate him. Do not feel bad when I win, as my quirk main focus is increased speed. He stated, nodding to her as they got to the starting line. Many, just like Ida, were confused when they saw her lean forward standing on the tip of her toes with her arms stretched out before her. When they were told to start, Himiko lunged forward, throwing her arms behind her. This catapulted her, giving her twice the distance Ida had gotten with then first second, as she was much lighter with just as strong muscles. Landing on the back of her feet, as she landed she threw her arms forward in order to carry her momentum as she switched to all fours, clearing the last half she needed to cover. The results were as followed: Ida Tenya with 3.04 seconds, and Himiko Toga with 2.74 seconds. Everyone was shocked to see this, as they expected the boy with engines in his legs to beat everyone here by a landslide. What none of knew was that she just used a super move she has recently made and had nearly perfected it. The idea behind it was to tap into the cat-like instincts she inherited from her mother, along with her quick natural bloodlust. As it was just seen the result of such a union, she was able to call forth the maximum tier of adrenaline rush her body could muster. The current side effects, however, were not violent but a tad awkward for anyone except Maple. Momo was joyfully committing this image to her memory as she saw Himiko purring and walking on all fours being pet by Maple. Others there were either embarrassed by watching this and were blushing heavily, or they were cringing at such a sight unsure of what to say. The side effect she has yet to mitigate was how her human intellect took a back seat for a short PRD as her cat instincts took over. Ahem. Moving on, the next pair are. And so Vlad King continued declaring names, getting people's attention. Aizawa would have done it, but he, along with Momo, Mina, Achiko, and surprisingly Pony Tsunatori of Class 1B, were also petting Himiko or scratching underneath her chin, DMN cat lovers. He said, remembering every time Aizawa ignored him in favor of a cat, and worse when the man-wife would laugh at him while the hobo did so. There were a few noticeable performances among both classes, for on Class 1A part their students who impressed were Ojiro, Todoroki, Mineta, Ashido, and especially Lopez. Mashireo Ojiro used his tail as a springboard along with his powerful legs to get 3/4 the distance before running the last stretch. Shoto Todoroki created an ice trail to slide on while also caused the other to slip and fall on their half. The dwarf boy known as Minoru Mineta apparently was immune to his ball stickiness bouncing off of them. As a result, despite his very tiny legs, he was able to get under 5 seconds by catapulting and jumping off of his ball he threw along the track. Mina Ashido, who went third last, used her acid to slide across the stretch of field as though she was ice skating across it. However, the smell of highly concentrated acid beside her opponent caused them to get dead last in the test overall, as they were too busy constantly wiping their tear-filled eyes. Also, they had need to cover their mouth and nose as to not breath it in, resulting in them crawling slowly to defeat as they wanted to avoid tripping into the acid. Reina Lopez, however, got the fastest time of 1.83 seconds as she made it to the finish. Class 1B were no slouches, however, as they too had some fairly well high scorers among their class. Yuga Aoyama got 5.51 seconds by using his belly button laser to fire himself across. Tsuyu Azui, due to her quirk, had very strong legs and got to the end in only 2 hops, getting only slightly higher time than Aoyama with 5.58 seconds. Pony Tsunatori launched her horns across the gap, holding onto them as she used little kicks with her bare hoofs to help push herself even faster. Setsuna Tokage and Reiko Yanagi both used their quirks to fly above the ground and straight through to the finish line. Finally, the last round was Maple vs Atsuka Kendo, all thinking this was going to be a quick win for the clearly athletic orange-haired girl. Unfortunately for Maple, most of her classmates doubted her cause of her small stature and lack of a clear definition of muscle. This would prove to be a grave mistake, as they had yet to realize what she was capable of. "Let's have a good race," Maple said, holding her hand out for her opponent to shake. Maple thought this was just gonna be a boring gym test, but to her surprise the two classes decided to use the opportunity to play together. Unfortunately for Maple, who still could not read a room, the atmosphere was far more intense than it should be for just playing. Atsuka Kendo, being the kind person she was, took Maple hand, shaking it in response, as she could tell the girl who was clueless was also being genuine. "Same here, good luck," she said, smiling at the girl when she noticed her growing. The small girl she was looking down at before was now replaced by the 4-armed reptilian-like girl who supposedly destroyed the exam. Looking up at Maple now, the martial artist realized how utterly screwed she was, thinking she would need to counsel the girl afterwards. As they were told to start, Atsuka saw Maple dash away like a blur, rocketing down the stretch, getting 2.03 seconds on her time. Everyone in both classes were shocked to see the tiny girl who they thought would be one of the weaker ones turn out to be possibly the strongest in both hero classes. UNEZU office. As always, when the quirked animal planned something, it almost always happened one way or another. In this case, him discreetly allowing both their requests for the field to be booked had worked out the way he had planned for it too. He knew full well that the two classes would get into a heated competition with each other. Well, all except Maple. Though the detention covering detail blackmail he just got for Aizawa courtesy of Himiko was well appreciated by him. "I should ask Recovery Girl to draw some BLD from me, I'm sure she will enjoy the snack," he said aloud to no one but himself, humming as he watched it unfold. Though he knew he would not care about the other teachers seeing this behavior, his wife was another story. Nizu knew full well how upset she would be for petting the chin of another girl but her, well human anyway, as cats were a shared passion for them. Normally Vlad rivalry with Aizawa would be a pain in my butt, but it looks like I can use it to good here. Nizu said, noting the creative uses of some quirks. Chuckling to himself when he saw how it ended up messing with their opponents but not directly enough to count as an attack. He felt for the pain the dwarf boy felt when it came to his stubby legs, despite his noted, handsy attitude towards girls. I should make sure to have Aizawa wring that out of the boy as soon as possible. He said to himself, questioning if Aizawa was the right choice for that job. The reveal of Maple, however, was glorious. He shouted, laughing at the looks on most of their faces, falling out of his chair at one point. No one would think such a sweet girl would have had such a quirk, as most people quirks were reflected in their personalities. All Might, who was observing the first years with him so as to prepare for class with them tomorrow, was focused on Himiko a bit more than Maple. Catching his breath, the principal gave All Might a sideways look with a small grin. I can tell you have more or less decided on her, so how much longer? Nizu asked, assuming it would be still some time. All Might broke his concentration to look at Nizu and give him the full attention he deserved. I think after the sports festival, that way if she says yes I can use the week-long internship to train her on it before classes again. All Might said, deciding to use the sports festival as a final indicator as to whether or not to trust her with his power. UA. With the first test out of the way and 1A scoring their first win, the two classes moved on to the next test of their abilities. This next one was the ball throw test, and the results were rather close to say the least. This was due to many unique uses of their quirks. For 1B, their heavy hitters in this round were more than ready to make up for not claiming the last one. There were those who used brute force to send the ball flying a fair bit farther than most. Among this group was Tsuyu Azui, Tenya Ida, Rikido Sato, Itsuka Kendo, and Jirota Shishida. Tsuyu using her strong legs to leap into the air before throwing the ball up and whipping it with her tongue to send it flying. Ida used his engines to boost his kick as it came back down after he threw it, hitting half of it with his knee so as to put more spin on it. Rikido Sato consumed some sugar using his quirk to increase his overall strength so as to throw it farther than he normally would. Itsuka Kendo used her physical strength from years of martial arts training along with her hand-enlarging quirk. Throwing it up, she struck it with the tips of her fingers in her enlarged hand in a jabbing motion for maximum power from her quirk/physical abilities. Jirota Shishida took a page from Himiko handbook and pushed his quirk like she did for a maximum boost, minus her embarrassing side effect. For those who are more technically skilled with their quirks or simply did not have an overwhelming amount of power, they did well themselves. Yuga Aoyama used his naval laser to launch the ball in a straight shot, while Sankaibara used his quirk to spin it around to gain momentum, throwing his at a 45-degree angle for what he assumed was maximum distance. Pony Tsunatori put the ball tightly in her horns and used them to carry the ball till it came loose. Reiko Yanagi used her quirk to make it go so high that it escaped gravity by breaking orbit, allowing her to finally release her quirk on the object. Getting an infinite score, she was on her knees so dizzy she could barely stand, and was quite happy with herself. Granted, when a Class 1A student easily got infinite as well without exhausting herself like she did, it made the victory slightly bitter for her. Then there was Narenjiki Shoda, who scored an impressive amount by using his quirk to cause a sudden burst of momentum as it began to slow down. Not too far behind him was Hiryu Rin, who accurately launched his scales at the ball to keep it going. At least till it got too far for him to hit it, resulting in its fall to the ground and the final tally of his score. Setsuna Tokeichi simply split her body apart in order to carry the ball as far up into the air before throwing it at Aizawa. Using the sun to blind him, she smashed his tablet with the ball, the electrical feedback from the device frying the distance tracker, causing the system to display it as infinite. Unfortunately for her, this victory was short-lived as Aizawa bound her in his scarf, nullifying her quirk. As much as Vlad King wanted to tell his student good job for messing with Aizawa and defend her from him, not even he could deny that Aizawa had the right to chew her out for attacking a teacher like that without warning. Class 1A also had some rather strong performances in this regard, just like their sister Class 1B. Ochiko Uraraka was the one that scored infinite on her turn, and Momo created a cannon to get it across a long stretch of the athletic field herself. Ibara Shiozaki raised it as high as her vines could possibly go, then squeezed it tight while leaving a small hole for it to exit from. The pressure built up to the point where it was shot out of her vines. The distance was quite good, getting her a high score. Shoto Todoroki created an iceberg to launch it further, which also resulted in him having to melt it down, delaying the test further. Fumikage Tokoyami used Dark Shadow superior strength to throw it as opposed to his own hands, as he was not particularly athletic. Mizo Shoji threw the ball with all of his might, showing unlike the last two how far one can get by with enough raw power. Nido Monoma, copying the quirk of Ochiko Uraraka, attempted to get infinite like her and help secure a win for his class. Sadly, he underestimated the natural tolerance to nausea that Ochiko had due to being born with a quirk with such a side effect. As a result, he succumbed to the nausea before the ball could break orbit, causing it to come crashing down into the circle. Needless to say, he was lucky that Aizawa pulled him out of the way in time, or else he would be splattered right now. The score he achieved for his efforts was a big fat 0. He was of course emotionally crushed by this when the nausea wore off and he could focus on them telling him the news. Minoru Mineta showed once again the versatility of quirks with less raw power as he jumped off a sticky ball throwing while air. His results were not as good as he had hoped, but he was just happy with not getting 0 like Monoma just had, therefore not being last place. Mashireo Ojiro used his tail to WHP it at high speeds, relying on his quirk raw power to pass. Maple decided to copy him as she too had a tail. The result was over 10 times the distance Ojiro got, leading Maple to comfort him. This however only made the young man feel worse, as the person who outdid him in the non-existent tail contest was the first to try and cheer him up. However, while she was cheering him up, Ida had finally recognized her from the news. "You are the Rose Demon," he shouted with an accusatory finger pointed at her. With that, the whole class of not just 1A but 1B as well broke out into absolute pandemonium over the revelations. Aizawa, who knew this was inevitable, but sighed as it was the tactless one of the two Ida brothers to out her. Pinching his nose, he glowered at Ida and all the others, causing them to calm down out of instinctual fear they felt when meeting his eyes. Though they calmed down, both teachers noticed how most of the other students stepped back a good distance away from Maple. The few not doing so being Momo, Himiko, Yui, Shoji, Tokoyami, and Mineta, who simply could not believe such a cute-looking girl was that monster on the news. Monoma, though he also stepped back, simply did so he could gauge his other classmates' reactions who stepped back earlier. In reality he felt no fear, as he figured her quirk was extremely strong to control and there being a proper story behind it. When I get to know her better as a classmate I will ask her about her rampage, for now I will stay away from that sore subject. He thought, disgusted by how those around her were treating her at the revelation of her quirk. UA. Stepping up last for the ball throw test was Reina Lopez, upbeat as always, getting excited that it was now her turn, pink hair with tufts of blue swaying in the air as she jumped up in joy. "I am gonna show the heroes back home who look down us that my dad quirk can be used for heroics as well," she thought, knowing she would get her chance at the upcoming sports festival. Her whole life the local heroes looked down on her family, saying that being maids for the environment was the closest they could ever get to being heroes. This however her parents ignored, despite the fact her mother had always dreamed of becoming a hero. However, her quirk was not suited for it, as it only allowed her to function at the same pace as other people with 1/10 of the oxygen required for them. But in her the two quirks merged perfectly, essentially granting her 2 quirks, so when she discovered this she decided that she would fulfill her parents' dreams and show the world that their quirks could be used to become a hero. Due to her performance in the previous test, everyone thought that her quirk involved displacing dirt or making the ground extremely soft to a point it was practically liquid. This was due to the fact that a boy from 1B had done something similar with his quirk, so they assumed her quirk functioned like this as well. In reality her quirk worked much differently as it allowed her to swim through any substance like it was water as well as function properly with far less oxygen than. As a result she was not limited to just solid substances as when using her full concentration was able to swim on the very air itself, causing it to ripple like a mirage. This caused them all to go slack-jawed as they saw her climbing higher into the air, giving the teachers and everyone else a warning to keep their eyes up. Mineta simply imagined this was her way of giving permission to check out her as, when in reality everyone else understood the warning after seeing what happened to Monoma earlier. Once she reached her limit of 76 kilometers she threw the ball forward on an angle with all of her might before swimming back down. The result as the ball landed, a massive crater was made, destroying half of the outdoor sports field. The dust cloud going beyond even UA borders covering the surrounding streets. Fortunately, other than a few minor car crashes on those streets, all of UA windows being blown out by the shock wave, and a localized earthquake causing minor structural damage, everything was fine. Nizu, now seeing for himself how much even he underestimated her quirk, decided that the school should be reinforced for the next generation of kids becoming heroes. Her score, by the way, was 70.23 kilometers, however despite her final impressive feat, 1B barely came out a win in this category. For grip strength it was fairly straightforward, with the ones with raw power coming out on top no matter how crafty anyone else got. As a result 1B claimed this one as well due to having more people with quirks boosting their physical strength or simply having better bodies than most due to physical training. The standing long jump was next, and despite it also appearing purely physical, technical control over one's quirk proved to be just as useful here. Yuga Aoyama cleared his turn with no issue as he used his quirk to launch himself to the other side. Tsuyu Azui, due to her strong legs, also easily cleared the hurdle as the half-French half-Japanese classmate of hers did. Tenya Ida used his engine quirk to push him the last little bit he need to in order clear it. His jump, however, his was not as clean as the other two as he landed just 1/8 of an inch from the edge. If ever asked to do it again he doubted he could twice in a row. Itsuka Kendo, due to years of her martial arts training, easily cleared it as well, better than Ida but still not as clearly as her other two classmates. Pony Tsunatori flew on her horns to easily clear the sandbox, with Reiko Yanagi simply floating herself to a clear victory. Last one to actually clear the sandbox was of course Hiryu Rin as he launched his scales and stepped over them, just barely making it to the other side, clearing the sandbox. Class 1A had unfortunately more people suited to this test than they did, as Achiko and Reina Lopez both made them themselves easily float or swim through the air to the other side, clearing it. Momo Yaoyorozu made a pole and used that to get across, clearing the hurdle for herself, satisfied with her result. Kyoka Jiro used her quirk to create a sonic boom underneath herself to get over to the other side, albeit on slightly shaky legs and slightly ringing ears. I definitely need to practice that move a bit more. The rocker girl thought to herself, glad that her plan worked. Mina Ashido, who was simply very athletic and had strong legs, cleared with brute force as her acid was relatively useless here. Mashireo Ojiro cleared it by using his tail as a springboard and shifting it mid-air to help distribute his body weight for his ideal landing. Minoru Mineta, for one of the very few times in his life, glad for his small stature and therefore low weight, easily cleared his turn with the use of his quirk. Maple simply jumped and landed on the other side with little effort as her physical abilities in this form were through the roof in terms of physical strength. Himiko also used purely her physical abilities, taking advantage of her small, lighter, and more flexible body to easily clear it. Ibara Shiozaki simply used her quirk to lift herself over to the other side with no issue, sending a glance back at Maple and Himiko. Fumikage Tokoyami turned his track suit jacket into a makeshift cloak to boost dark shadow and float on his companion to the other side with ease. Shoto Todoroki created an ice bridge to slide/carry himself over to the other side. These results had meant that 1A had won this round, ting it up 2-2 for the classes. For the repeated sidesteps there were very few who could use their quirks creatively enough to actually help them with the test. Minoru Mineta with his quirk bounced side to side, easily getting the highest score on the test, even surpassing Maple, shocking everyone. However, what most did not realize was just like her, other students with bulky frames would have some degree of difficulty with this test along with the last one. Fumikage Tokoyami used Dark Shadow to help push him from side to side, getting just a little more than most but still less than Mineta. Tsuyu Azui used her stronger legs, which was natural due to her quirk, to get a higher score than most of the others on this test. Kinoko Komori on the other hand used her quirk similar to Mineta. Taking a page out of his book, she used her quirk to quickly make springy mushrooms grow. She then used these mushrooms as her own springboards like he did with his purple ball to jump side to side, getting a high score, claiming second overall on this test. Setsuna Tokage used her levitating limbs to go back and forth, earning her a high score as well. She not a recommended student for no reason after all. Reiko Yanagi was the last impressive quirk use, as she used her quirk to slightly increase her speed going forth. She accomplished this feat by gently tugging on the bottom of her pants on and off on either side instead of the slow float she would have had if she used it on her whole body. 1B claiming this win, putting it 3-2, was getting confident at the recent landslide victory they just had. Setsuna Tokage being who she was, decided to saunter over to the opposing class to try and get them off their game. Well, look at what we have here," she said with a slated smile as they all turned to her. Seeing that she now had their attention, she continued her speech. "You may have some impressive quirks and a literal monster on your side, but it seems that still is not enough to easily beat us so-called second placers, is it?" Setsuna said, as she knew people viewed her and her classmates, the backup heroics class, as people always did when it came to UA. However, when she saw the visibly pained look on Maple's face at being called a monster, she barely managed to keep her composure as she winced inside. Note to self: apologize to her later when neither of our classes are not around. She thought to herself, never intending to hurt the girl or discriminate against her. However, her initial plan to rattle up and defocus most of the opposing class did work as she had originally intended. Aizawa and Vlad King were originally going to get on Setsuna Tokage's case for calling Maple a monster like that after she was outed earlier. But they were trained enough, unlike these kids, to notice the almost missed body signs that the girl felt bad after seeing Maple react to her words. Pleased that she was not clearly trying to discriminate against Maple, they let out relieved sighs and calmed down the classes so as to continue with the tests. For the seated toe touch, many among both classes had naturally more flexible bodies than their peers, or simply had trained their bodies differently. As for the test itself, it involved simply placing the bottom of your feet oboist a wooden block with a measuring stick attacked at the top. The farther you pushed the stick on the slider, the higher your score went up, within place being an obvious limit. Naturally, those who could not even push the slider got a negative score based on the distance between your hands and where the block started. For Class 1A, this meant people like Mina Ashido, who were both naturally more flexible and had increased that threshold further due to her dance training. The difference between her and most of her classmates was like that of heaven and hell, with Himiko being the only one capable of completely folding herself as well. When Momo and Achiko had tried it and failed, people were surprised as they thought these two could have done it easily. This failure caused a momentary spike of tension between Jiro and them when she did far better than them. Not because of what they did, but because Kaminari made a joke about her flat CHST giving her an advantage. Needless to say, after that the electric quirk user failed his due to Jiro kicking him so strong in his lower back that he could not stretch at all when his turn came up. Vlad King tried to defend the boy, but when Aizawa said he needed to learn not to say the first thing that came to mind. Not even the BLD-based pro hero could bring himself to disagree that kid deserved what for saying such a thing to a lady. Yui Kodai, due to her parents making her do gymnastics when she was younger, got a fairly good score herself. Ibra Shiozaki used her vines to pull herself as far as she could go with pulling her back muscles, as they still had 2 tests left, with Tokoyami doing the exact same thing with Dark Shadow. Ejiro Kirishima and Tetsu with being relatively fit people were able to do it with good score, though flexibility really wasn't their strong suits. Nito Monoma made up for his failure with the ball throw here with using Ibra Shiozaki quirk to get a good score. Mashireo Ojiro used his tail to get his all the way, making the few who Quirks were absolutely useless here jealous of his extra limb for the first time since meeting him. Shoto Todoroki just used his physical abilities to get a good score, as his father had used these same sort of tests over the years with him to help with his physical conditioning. Minoru Mineta and Mizo Shoji both failed for completely opposite reasons, as one was too short and the other too large to fold properly. Shoji could have used his quirk to grow his limbs longer, but he had a limit as to how far he could grow it currently before it became too weak due to lack of muscle on the limb. Shirhai Kurwaro got a decent score, but nothing that couldn't easily be beaten by someone using their quirk effectively. Koji Koda did relatively okay, as his physical mutation quirk he inherited from his mother gave him a stronger than average body. Reina Lopez was like Mina in terms of flexibility, but rather than dancing, she had gotten this level of physical ability due to years of assisting her father. However, what truly shocked most was Maple in her transformed state, actually failing. It seemed that her transformed form, though much stronger in terms of raw power, sacrificed flexibility to do so. For 1B, another surprise student came forward, as most thought Yuga Aoyama, whose quirk gave him stomach cramps, would be bad at this. When in fact he stated clearly for them, "I practice my after-attack poses every day, something like this is a mere warm-up for me," like it was normally to spend hours practice posing. Still, his class was happy to see this unexpected skill from their classmate, earning them a possible win with his perfect fold. Tsuyu Azui was also able to do a complete fold on her part as her frog quirk, giving her a great advantage as due to her overall more flexible than most bodies. You see, the muscles in her back were quite flexible to compensate for the strain of her powerful jumps and other acrobatics put on her body. Tenya Ida did relatively well, though his quirk was also relatively useless in this test, so he had to do so without it. Rikido Sato did just as well as people thought someone as bulky as him would, which was bad. Though he barely got a passing grade, it was not enough to carry a win for his class. Toru Hagakure did what would be considered an average performance in terms of no quirk usage. Yosetsu Aways got a little more than the average distance for someone of his size and build when doing such test. This was mainly due to his father years of failed attempts to try to train him to take over his family mechanic shop. Granted, he tried to play a prank on the next 1A student after him by using his quirk to weld the measuring part in place. However, the two teachers noticed that right away and told him to undo it immediately, as they actually needed to properly test the students here today. Senkaibara, due to the effect his quirk had on his muscles from training with it, his body was able to do a complete fold. Toguro Kamakiri, who usually hated the fact his insect-like traits from the mutant part of his quirk resulted in harsh treatment growing up, were a blessing here. Due to his insect-like traits, his body was far from rigid, resulting in him have a much wider range of flexibility than most, allowing him to do a complete fold. Itsuka Kendo got a decent score as well, thanks to using her hand enlarging quirk to push it all the way, getting the maximum score. Pony Tsunatori, if not for her detachable horns, would have come shy of passing, but due to them got the maximum score. Jiroda Shishida, however, like his classmate Rikido Sato, had difficulty with this test, as such he lost when compared to his 1A comparative opponent. Koziite Tsuburaba, Juzo Hananuki, and Manga Fukudashi got an average to make up for their larger and more hairy classmate's score. Hiryu Rin used his scales to push it to the maximum score, Reiko Yanagi used her quirk to do the same, and then Setsuna Tokage used her quirk to push it over with her removed arms herself. Then there were the smaller and less athletic of the class had much more difficulty, which were those like Kinoko Komori, Narenjiki Shoda, and Kojiro Bando. The final results sadly had 1A as the winners for this, tying it up 3-3 with only 2 events left to do. UNEZU office. Things looked as though they were beginning to heat up with both classes, well, most of them, realizing that it would either end in a tie or 2-point win. The two exceptions being Pony Tsunatori and Maple Usagiyama, who were both innocently thinking this was just some sort of exciting game between rival classes. Note to self, perhaps I should make sure to check that those two are not the only ones among the students that lack the ability to properly read the room. He said, sipping his tea just before he nearly spit it out. Seeing them tie on the sit-ups test meant one thing, and that was the next test was gonna be a hell on earth for the more minor quirks. Then all of a sudden he got a sudden chill run up his spine, though he was unsure as to what caused it, so he checked all of UA's security camera quickly. Nothing was seen on then. This meant that whatever triggered his animalistic instincts was not on school grounds, yet. However, even if he did not know what to expect at the moment, he did know that he would need to brace himself for the future aftermath of what was to come of this feeling. Looks like those vultures Aizawa hates so much will be going for our throats again, he said, letting out a sigh. The last time the school had any sort of major incidents was just before he became principal. In fact, it was why his predecessor was fired and he was hired. Though he was not rusty at damage control, as over the many years a few students here and there were let go due to violent and all-around unacceptable behavior. With the recent school witch hunt, however, he found out that those problem students were having their issues long before they began going to UA. Though we cannot do anything about the students that had graduated, we fortunately were able to take care of current students. Nizu said to himself, recalling last year's mass exodus of students. Students all the way up to the third years were expelled due to previous behavior being discovered at their original schools by police. Though it left him a bit saddened to see nearly a third of the third-year students getting expelled just as they were so close to graduating. It did, however, explain why they were so problematic even going into their third years, with him previously writing it off as inexperienced youth. While he tried to convince the board to let him give the students an ultimatum as to their future for the second and third years, it was rejected. He understood they needed to save UA face in this, and hiring Mirko was a good distraction to save them. Heck, he even agreed that the third years were beyond hope of salvaging in time for graduation, and as such he could not argue with them on that decision. But he still had a year and a half by that point for the other two grades to get them into order. His teachers could do it. Even so, they did not share his faith in his staff and decided to play it safe this time. Fortunately for the second years, there was time to pull general education students who impressed in the sports festival to fill out the roster. Even with a year and a half of training behind, with some intense catch-up training/studying were good for the second years. The first years at the time, there was no problem there, as the semester had barely begun and the sports festival gave them the chance to properly assess the students. Random prison. At the moment when Nizu instincts went off on him, stepping up to the front gate to see a van delivering something to the prison, the girl in the blue cloak smiled at the sight of her target now in sight, sneering with absolute glee as this reminded her of the first guild versus guild event from the game. She began her attack. The guards at the gate were trying to figure why the van had the official paperwork but they were not listed in the system. While doing so, they saw a girl wrapped in a blue cloak slowly walking her way towards the prison. "Hey, who are you?" he called out to try and identify them. However, as they gave no response but kept walking, the guard began getting nervous. That was when they suddenly threw a fireball at the guard station, blowing it to pieces. The owners of the van pleaded to be let in before they were killed by the unknown assailant. For obvious reasons, the guard let them in and shut the front gate, going into panic mode for the whole prison. Reporting to the warden what was happening, he was told that all outside communication was jammed. While this was going on, outside the wall, the young girl based off of her frame was running around the perimeter. They assumed looking for a weak spot. However, despite firing everything they had at her, it seemed to all just miss her. Though they were sure she took direct hits in the torso multiple times, the dust cloud made them unable to be 100% sure, though, as it obstructed their view of her. They assumed she had some sort of high-tech armor underneath her clothes to shrug off their bullets. Right now they were under the assumption she had a speed quirk and used another gadget to create her fireball earlier. They thought that she was most likely sent to find an entry spot for her whole group on the outside wall shortly before said group arrived. Despite not knowing when the assailants' backup would arrive, they had no idea if they needed to reserve ammo. As such, until they took her down or she left, they also could not send anyone to get help without putting the messenger's life at risk. Unfortunately for them, she was already in, as after that first fireball she immediately used an illusion spell to make a copy of herself to make them look away for a second. That second was well used however, as she made herself invisible and activated super speed, getting inside the prison just as it locked down. Walking without being seen, she made her ways through the open doors, avoiding guards as she made her way to locker room after pickpocketing a guard's ID. Fortunately there were no cameras here, as this was a private space meant for them to get changed in. Using the ID she pickpocketed, she got into the database and scrolled through it till she found it. Taking a mental note of the number and going briefly over the map of the prison, memorizing a few of the fastest routes, she got off of the computer. Then she put over her current clothes the civilian clothes she packed with her from her bag, putting the blue cloak in it. Hiding the ID under the desk as she heard someone approaching, she took a deep breath and began huddling underneath the desk, pretending to be afraid. That was when a guard came running in, and seeing her there trembling, he was about to pull his pistol on her when he saw her tearing up. Asking her who she was, he was told her father came in to get something today he forgot yesterday, and she came along with him. Why the hell did the idiot have to show his daughter his workplace today of all days? They thought, cursing the incompetence of the guard and the ones at the gate for forgetting to let everyone know. He assumed she dropped her visitor pass when the alarms went off, however they had no time to waste with finding it. Stay in this locker for now, I will come to get you once the prisoners are subdued. He told her, opening up his locker for her to hide until the rioting from the alarm was over. It was just his luck that they were attacked when half of the prisoners were out of their cells, deciding to add to their problems. With that done, he went out, praying none of the prisoners would get this far and she would be safe from harm. Unfortunately for him, now that he was gone, Sally was able to put part 2 of her plan into motion as she got out and used her invisibility skill again. Part 2, make my way to solitary confinement to meet him. She told herself as she quietly slipped out, running towards the ever-growing chaos with a smile on her face like a child who is about to open their Christmas presents. Deeper into the prison. Making her way slowly through the prison, having to narrowly avoid bumping into guards and prisoners a few times, she made it to her next destination. Going to the mess hall, she made it to the kitchen, where she could take the more discreet back way to the south side of the prison only employees have access to normally. Deciding to make sure no stragglers came after her, noticing her, she used air cutters and a fireball to block it off. Dashing towards the break room, coming up she noticed people were inside, huddled in a corner. Checking for the obvious, she found out it was locked and blocked by a table with some chairs. Letting out a groan of annoyance at this pitiful excuse of a barricade, she knocked on the door. All right in there, I don't give a DMN about hostages, nor do I want to waste my time with any of you NPCs. Just let me unlock the next level and recruit the berserker for my party, she said in a dull voice. There was nothing but silence on the other side, as they did not understand even half of what she said to them. However, what they did determine was that she somehow broke in past the wall and gunners, but that did not necessarily mean she killed all the guards. In fact, if she was this deep, that probably meant that someone probably managed to escape to a distance where they could call for backup. However, they made a mistake in thinking that she only had speed and not strength, as they did not get the full report. This stalemate they were trying to do while waiting for a hero was pissing off Sally, so she decided to teach them a lesson. Unleashing multiple fireballs, she burst through the door with relative ease. Walking in, she saw them all go completely pale as the BLD drained from their faces. Well then, since you already wasted a few minutes of my time, what is the harm of a few more with you assisting me on an experiment? She said, grinning ear to ear as she remembered the rush she felt the last time she did this. Leaving the room out the other end a few minutes later, whistling to herself, she closed the door behind her to the massacre. Just a few minutes before she was manipulating the BLD in their veins, she made half of them use the knives there to peel the flesh off of the other half till they died. This, however, was not even the highlight of what she did to them for getting in her way, not by a long shot. She was going to let them live, but sadly for her they killed themselves as soon as they realized they could control their bodies again. When the police and heroes reviewed the footage later, they were horrified to think that someone warped a young girl to be able to commit the atrocities she had committed. Back to a certain bird boy. Back to the present, however, one hero in particular was flying to the prison to talk to one Katsuki Bakugou. Hoping that with the recent discovery they may have witnessed something important. That day they discovered Maple as he was caught on camera loitering nearby when the incident occurred. On the way his communicator to HPSC HQ went dead, though he normally would not find a hiccup like this odd, considering where he was going today, he decided to pick up speed. If there was one thing he learned, it was to trust his instincts, and right now they were screaming at him to hurry. When he finally got there he saw Risa running around the prison walls and saw the guards shooting at her. However, getting closer to her he saw that all of them were going straight through, causing her form to ripple. He almost forgot she could create illusions. Flying up to the guard towers he told them to stop wasting time on her illusion. At first they ignored him and continued till he grabbed one of them by the throat and ordered them to get their acts together. All of them stopping and now looking more closely as some of his feathers passed through, they realized he was right. Asking what the hell had been going on, they told him about her earlier attack and the prison riot. However, due to them diverting some resources and manpower to deal with her illusion, the prisoners held the upper hand. Letting out an uncharacteristically frustrated sigh, he tells them he will help them subdue the prisoners before going after her. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 4. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author Kuji17 on fanfiction.net. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.